Please welcome John Gunderson to the stage.
Thank you. So I would start out and say, just some career advice. If you want to have a lot of roles, don't be the eager, younger person standing next to the CEO, right? That's how you get these jobs. Because you often get them because they don't know who else to give them to. So I would just caution you as we start that to avoid that. So all joking aside, I'm a distributor guy to my core. So started with Crescent Electric Supply, was with Whitecap Construction Supply, HD Supply Power Solutions, Annixter, EIS Motion, and with Modern Distribution Management. I have been family, PE, public. I've been the buy-e and the sell-e on so many occasions. I have been traded for a player to be named later during transactions more times than a AAA pitcher from Omaha. So we're going to really dive in today and talk about what it means to be in supplier relations, how it fits into the total, what I call ecosystem. So we're going to talk from a distributor perspective, and we're going to talk from a manufacturer perspective. It is the last session. If you have questions during the session, please ask them, because this needs to be interactive. This is going to be very tactical, okay? More like here's things you can do and where to take it. So you can follow stuff, do a lot of speaking, writing if you follow Modern Distribution Management, which I would recommend you do. A lot of content out there, podcasts, lots of things that I've done and our firm has done. So let's kind of dive in. So that's the core of what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about how the role has evolved. So what's changing today that I think is really important for you is either a manufacturer or a distributor to keep track of. So before we get going, who in the room is a distributor? If you don't mind raising your hands. Okay. Well, you kind of are, right? Okay. Who's a manufacturer? Okay, so we got a pretty good mix. So the first section is really about distribution, but we're going to talk about what it means to you as a manufacturer. Okay. And the last section is about, from a manufacturer perspective, what you want out of your rebate deal. To me, rebates are just one part of your strategic business agreement with a distributor or a manufacturer. It has to fit in holistically with what you're doing on pricing, what you're doing on inventory, what you're doing on first cost positions. It should not be worked in a box on its own. We're going to talk about that today. Okay? So I think this is an important setup. So how's the business changed? And I'm really speaking more from an industrial and construction perspective. So if you're in food, this may not completely apply, but I'll bet a lot of it does. So back when I first got my sales bag back in, a long time ago, back pre-iPhone, this is the way the business worked. The manufacturer would go to the distributor with a plan, and all of us smart men and women in distribution leadership, we would take that plan, we'd give it to our branches and the team, and then we'd go to the person really in control, the account manager, calling on the end customer. And we'd play telephone and hope that our plan got all the way through, right, to the account manager. And that account manager, if you look on the left, the end customer needed the distributor. 2014 is when things really flipped, right? 2014 is when we all got a supercomputer in our pocket, right? That's when the world really changed. But up until 2014, the end customer was dependent on you for product support, technical support, lunch and learns, right? Who in this room is doing all sorts of lunch and learn training? Personal relationships. They were channel dependent. There wasn't as many options. If you were in a channel, there wasn't as many options. There wasn't Amazon Marketplace. There wasn't a lot of these choices. Love you or hate you, the customer had to deal with you. And face-to-face, belly-to-belly selling ruled. And that account manager controlled the relationship. Oftentimes for the manufacturer had to come and kiss that person's ring. The manufacturer rep had to, and then the competitors were always after it. But it was much more of a one-way relationship. Today, what has flipped is the customer's in control. Those of you out there that don't think the customer in control, you're deluding yourself. the amount of control they're going to have is going to grow. And that affects how you do your SBAs and your rebates significantly. So today, customer self-service mindset. They discover their info online. They want price transparency. They're not as dependent on you. They have a growing desire to communicate with you any way they want. They oftentimes only call you when they're stuck. Now that's intoxicating oftentimes when you get that call like, oh, I'm a superhero, I solved this problem. But there less and less of that is happening. The way I want you to think about it is visits to your web platform were phone calls 10 years ago. I think that's an amazing time for us to be in this business because back then you couldn't track your phone calls. Today you can. So this is all going to fit together. I want to make sure everybody understands how things have changed because how I think about rebates and programs is completely different than I was in the role in 2014 than today. Okay? Any thoughts on that before we move on? Anybody disagree? Happy to have an argument. I mean, I'm between you and a plane flight. Okay. All right. So, going backwards. So what else has changed? This is really important. Less local, more corporate. So the power in 2010 and with the sales rep, it was more branch. It was less corporate. Less support from corporate office making decisions. That is changing. It's continuing to move from left to right. Local control to a team leader. So how distributors are being compensated, the end users, that is changing. They're getting paid more on branch sales and gross margin dollars and KPIs, less about the total profitability of the business. There are centralized teams. Everybody's centralizing to some degree, either regionally or nationally when it comes to rebates and SBAs. Fewer people involved in the conversation, more central control. So there's centralized teams that are driving pricing, category management, ops, inventory, logistics. And the local manager is now more of a sales leader versus a running the business leader. That's a trend that I think is really important for you as you're dealing with your channel or with you're dealing with your supplier partners. So it's kind of becoming, as I used to say, moving from the distribution monarchy, see how I got England in there for you, Leanne? To now the democracy. So that's an important thing. So how you structure your rebates and your incentives and your programs needs to reflect that reality. So here's the 7 things that distributors think about and manufacturers think about in the order of importance. Sales effectiveness, leadership. Sales always rules. Manufacturer, distributor, everything comes second to sales. We've got a history of face-to-face calling, being in front of people. Sales wins all the time. Never forget it. The second most important thing in distribution today is category management. Supplier relations, whatever you call it, managing the strategic business agreement. The backside, the 2% net 10, my return goods authorization, the rebate. I have worked with distributors where I've been on teams where some years it's 40% of our total profit. There's been years where it's 100% of our total profit, the backside. So think about how critical that is to me as a distributor. In the industrial and construction channels, that's pretty common. What's interesting is many distributors don't put the focus on that they need to. They're kind of like, hey, we're all about sales, and we let category management kind of handle itself, and we hope the number's there. You know, it sounds a little blasé, but they don't put the discipline on it that they need to. Third, pricing, GM improvement. How do I make more money? And we can argue on which order they come in, but those are the top 3. Everything else falls below it. Inventory is important, optimization is important, purchasing is important, digital enablement is important. And what you can see here is kind of where things are going. The more local a distributor is, the more it's branch-led. The more national they are or super regional, the more it is national-led. But there's becoming fewer local distributors and more national. And even those that are local distributors are using buying groups like yours and yours, right? They're rolling up and trying to become a national when it comes to scale. So again, here are the 7 pillars, and you'll get these slides. I think you'll find them interesting. But on category management, distributors are focusing more talent and resources on improving the strategic business agreements with suppliers. A tiered system of manufacturers by product category and markets is where the market is going. If you are a manufacturer or a supplier, you have to understand where you fit in that tiering system with every single distributor that you do business with today. It's absolutely critical. Where do I rank? What am I? Am I preferred? You're going to hear different terms when you're out there. Sometimes if you're top tier, they'll call you strategic or preferred or approved or somebody we don't get anything with who you're trying to get rid of, right? They may use terms like that. So I think it's really critical for you to understand, because everybody in here, majority of people in here are category management, right? Supplier relations, but how it fits in. All great strategic business agreement programs are working with each of the other functional elements to really drive. Sales, you've got to work with pricing. You've got to be working with your inventory team. Why would you do a rebate agreement and backside agreement and stock-up agreement if you're not worried about inventory? You got to be working on first cost. In some cases, you may want to take first cost versus a rebate. Get a lower into stock, be able to drive top-line margin. You have to bring in the digital enablement portion of it. Like we talked earlier, how people want to buy is changing. If you're a manufacturer, you need to bet more dollars in support on distributors who are moving faster digitally. They should get an unfair share of your support. And you should start to treat people differently with your programs. And then inventory optimization. Right now, I do a lot of work in the channel. Everybody's screaming out inventory, right? Things kind of slowed. Everybody had safety stock at the end customer. The distributor has a lot of safety stock. Manufacturers are getting a lot of, hey, can you take that back type calls right now. Inventory optimization is big. So pricing pressure is as high as I've ever seen it in the last 10 years. Inventory optimization, cleaning up, figuring out what to do. You have to factor that into your rebate conversations. If someone's coming back to you as a manufacturer and saying, I need you to take this back, you've got to come back with data saying, I'm willing to do a 2-for-1 exchange, but here's what I need from you. And I would really, really concentrate on that if I was you. So how to build a best team? And this is from a distributor perspective. You got to have one throat to choke. I hate to put it in those terms, but you got to have a leader. You got to have someone that runs this. As an executive leader, it can't be a part-time job. So many distributors, they just have 7 people working on it. Nobody's working on it. You have to have a leader. You have to have an executive sponsor at the highest level. It's either the second or third most important thing to your business. If you don't have executive sponsorship, you are not staying up to par with everybody else. You have to have finance leadership. There's some finance leadership in here that handle that. Finance is critical. How you're doing the accruals. How are you, Enable's got great tools to help you do that. How are you accounting for the most important backside agreement at the end of the year, which makes up 40 to 100% of your profit? You have to have finance leadership, diligence, and tracking. You must, I'm begging with you to have a team that handles channel management and channel relations that is not just local. You have to have a group of people that this is their passion. And you got to have a process. You got to have a workbench, right? Enable's really got a workbench that they built for you. You've got to be able to track every dollar, every transaction, and not leave any money on the table. By the way, it's important for you as a distributor. It's just as important for the manufacturer. Because if you can deliver value and growth, the manufacturer's happy to pay you. That's why you've got to claim every dollar. So best practices, and here I would love to get your input. You've got to manage your SBAs. Has to be bigger than rebates, has to be your entire program. Cash discount, getting a 2% net 10, getting a 2-for-1 exchange on our RGA, return goods authorization, getting a first cost reduction that you work into the agreement. Maybe it's not a rebate, but you've got to track all that and attack that aggressively. You have to work and stratify your manufacturers and distributors. Who here in the room stratifies their supplier base today? Distributors, if you don't mind raising your hand. You do. I'm sure you do. Anybody else? You do? For those of you that didn't raise your hand, why not? I mean, some suppliers are more important than others. Bet on your top suppliers, grow with them. Stratification, if you're not playing the ladder game, which we're going to talk about, then you're probably not being aggressive against. In my experience at Wesco, and some of the other things, most people really think I'm like a super nice, calm individual. But if I'm meeting with a supplier and I'm in category management, it is go time, right? We're going to have a professional conversation, but it is going to be about win-win for both of us. But I work for the distributor, right? I am going to be very aggressive with my ask. You need to be just as aggressive back to me with your ask. And if we can help each other grow, let's go, right? And if we can't, we'll shake hands and I'll move on to somebody else. That's the way you need to have a mindset, my opinion. There's a lot of talk about win-win, and it's wonderful. But the biggest win-win is financial returns for both parties. Financial returns for both parties. And scorecard, you got to track everything. So who's doing the ladder game today? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? So it's just a simple concept. Let's just say I'm an electrical and I'm selling boxes and fittings. It's kind of a common category for an electrical. Who's my number one strategic supplier by market? Because it can vary by market. I may be with somebody in Dallas and somebody else in Chicago. Who's my preferred? And then who's everybody else? You have to concentrate on the suppliers that are everybody else, that are not getting you the best agreements. And you have to play the ladder game to where you're moving business and support to the strategic and preferred suppliers that you're after. So what I always say is write the rules hard, but also work with your team to make the best decisions. So build a system where you're moving people up the ladder, but also be flexible enough that you're not hurting the business. Because I have seen many teams cut off a supplier that happens to be the favorite supplier of our top customer just because they don't understand the darn business, and it really hurts you. So you have to be smart. You have to overlay your customer data. You have to overlay your pricing and your inventory data. But you want to get the best support. Enables developing a tool on spas. Get as many spas as you can, right? Tie as many spas together with your top strategic suppliers. That's win-win. Barrier to exit. Think about that. Barrier to exit. If you have a special pricing agreement, that's a barrier to exit for that customer, for both you as the distributor and you as the manufacturer. Manufacturer gets more data on that customer. It is a barrier to entry for your competition too, right? Get as many of those as you can. And then that helps create better support. The more important you are to your manufacturer partners, the more important you are to your distributor partners, the higher you get on the, what I call, top of mind, okay? So, for example, I'll just give you an electrical example. I've been on teams where we were managing 1,500 suppliers, right? We had 200 strategic suppliers. And we had a team of, this is one of the biggest guys in the space, maybe 15 people. So if you're sitting at number 75, do I ever really get to you? How do you move up that list to get more important to me? I think it's something you got to think about all the time. So everybody is Paretoing each other. So who's my biggest customer? And then I go down here, and then I do the next one. Think about where you stand in the ecosystem, and how do you get your unfair mind share? That's the quickest way to grow your sales, your margin, and your rebate agreements. And then stock. Why do manufacturers go to distributors? If it was all direct and they shipped every order direct, why would they need distribution? Distribution takes big boxes from the manufacturers. They unpack them, they put them on the shelf, they then ship it out in smaller boxes. Stock is everything. That is why a manufacturer uses you primarily as a distributor. Everything should be about stock. That's a huge, every manufacturer in this room, is stock important to you, Will? That's like probably number one, right, on your list? Yeah. The direct business is kind of like, oh, well, we're going to get our projects, we're going to win. But stock and flow helps him manage his production. Everything's about stock. Everything else is noise, in my opinion. I know that's a hyperbole statement, but I want you to focus your attention on where it's important to you. And then now let's flip into the fun side. So, now that I've been out of distribution, I've had to become friends with many manufacturers. I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm trying, Will. I'm trying. It's tough. Yeah, feelings mutual. Thanks, Will. Because I know I've tangled with you in your company before. We were just talking about that. But what's important to a manufacturer? Sales partnership. How can you grow my sales? Every manufacturer has a shared goal that they have by market across the United States. If I'm talking to Will, I want to know where we're together that he wants to grow share by market. And I want to talk to him about what we can do in Omaha, Nebraska. Real things that grow sales. Not talk about how tall the corn is this year. Let's figure out plans to grow sales. Because that's a conversation that you'll accept, right, Will? Every day. And I'll bet he doesn't have a lot of distributors doing that with him today. No. So many manufacturers do their rebate programs and they view it as a tax or the cost of doing business. You got to change your mindset. It's got to be about growth. Outside, inside support, fair pricing, holding me in the market. I don't want you to grow sales for me if I'm a manufacturer, if you're just doing nothing but bombing the market and creating a lower price. You've got to distinguish who's just always on you for price that then lower the market level price. What does that do for you? It hurts everybody in the channel. So you've got to start to distinguish who you're working with. Then these are the big 6 areas. And stock. Stock. Any thoughts on this before I move on? Any disagreement on this? Who in this room is having specific 6-point conversations with every supplier they have in negotiation? I can tell you the big guys are, right? This is the playbook that they use. On a manufacturer side, you have to score your channel. Just because somebody's charming doesn't mean they're good for your business. You have to score your channel. You have to understand market alignment and coverage. This is just an example, right? You've got to score each group. What are their product and operational expertise? What can they do to grow? What's their integration, cost to serve? Where do they stand locally, regionally, nationally, digitally? You have to have a scorecard on every partner you have. Have to. It's the only way to treat the people that help you grow your business differently. It's not easy to do because you've got people, challenges, historical, but I would say the minute you can start to scorecard and provide data, you'll be able to move your organization little by little by little to the focus that you want. So, score each channel partner. What are your current? This is just an example. You have to determine what you want to score your distributors are. you have to understand which ones warrant the highest investment resources and program. So for example, I'll use Will again. If we've decided that I'm going to help him grow in Omaha, I have to then make sure he knows he's my top partner in the category he serves me in, and I got to go all in to serve him because he's given me preferential treatment for doing that, and then I got to deliver the numbers. And if we don't, we'll get in a room and figure out an alternative plan next year. But it has to be at that level that you've got to start to negotiate with people, and you've got to use qualitative and quantitative data. Now this is I've seen a lot of buzzwords here. Qualitative, see, this is the part where I get I actually learned this when I was in college. I didn't go to Harvard like you did, Brent. But qualitative is written type survey groups, right? Quantitative is scored. It blows my mind how many distributors I work with that do not survey their supplier base, their end customers on a regular basis. Why not? Why not? Are you doing that? Anybody in the room? Why do you want to do that? Any ideas? What kind of feedback do you get today, Will? Just asking anybody. When you get feedback, what does it sound like? I'll give it a try. Joe from Omaha called and said, this distributor is treating us bad and we got to get down lower on price, and that's all the data you get, right? And then he asks you to make a decision. Everybody gets all this anecdotal feedback. Anecdotal feedback. Why are you not getting organized feedback? So if you're getting organized feedback, you can structure SBAs and rebates properly. And that way, if you're organized with a workbench, you can touch more suppliers and do more work. So that example I gave you where we had 2,000 suppliers and there's really only 200 we could concentrate on. If I'm more organized, maybe I can get to 250 if I've got a good tool, right? Maybe I can go down. And the more organized you get, the more you got a workbench, the deeper you can go, the faster you can go. We are playing move the fence here, folks, right? I'm here, okay? Now what I'm getting, maybe I'll get a person that I can add to my team because I'm showing the financial results. Now I move the fence again. Classic move the fence approach is what I advocate you do. So is anybody in the room on a supplier side doing a scorecard of any sort? I know, nobody. Let me just ask it this way. When you go in for your annual planning meeting, what are you talking about? Last year's sales, turns, how much margin you're making? Is it probably at that level today? Okay. Not enough, right? How many of you come out of meetings with your distributors and you feel like, well, we told each other we loved each other, and we're set a goal for 5% growth next year, and I spray and pray that, and we promised to make 50 joint sales calls together, and I actually know we're not going to make any. But hey, I'll see you next year. Is that a winning strategy anymore? It is not a winning strategy anymore. Suppliers who come in with more data get more preference. If I'm in the role of a category management person, and I'll just speak this way, I had two fears, right? I was responsible for 40 to 100% of the profit of the company, okay? I feared letting the CFO down. So if I did the accruals wrong, that was January 3rd was really bad for me. If the accrual amount was off, the CFO was in and they were thinking about, I hope they gave me a yellow like corrective action paper, but I was always concerned about getting the pink paper, right? If you're off with the CFO, you're in trouble. No matter good or bad, you got to be on that number. You got to be on that number. How do you get there? Better organization, right? The second thing you want is to maximize the return on the business. And at the end of the year, you do never want to be $4,000 short on something that could have earned you $100,000. I don't care if you got to handwrite a stock order to Alaska on January 31st. You never let that happen. You know, you get that order in by December 31st so that you don't lose that $100,000 because you weren't on top of it and you were $8,000 short. Because you had a 4% rebate. If you'd hit that level back to $1, you're like, oh my God, right? That is critical for you to think about. So as a manufacturer, that's my fear point. How can you help me alleviate the fear? And if you give me the best numbers, I may not tell you, Will, but I'll hug you for it later, right? That is so good because then I don't have to waste time on you. You're really helping me. You see where I'm going? You have to have the numbers. So those with the most accurate numbers on either side win more often. It's that simple. Because your competitors are not going to be as aggressive or organized as you are. So I'm kind of old school, and we're about to get to questions. I really feel for my competitors. When they're drowning, I think about throwing them a life raft. But actually, I take a garden hose and try and jam it down their throat. Yeah. That's what you need to be on both sides. And those that are aggressive and manage their backside SBAs and rebates are going to win more often. And I know that was a funny statement, but that is a win-win. If I can help you grow where you need it and you can help me grow where I need it, we're going to be best friends. Best friends. And the more preference you give me and the more I deliver, the more you can get from your leadership, the more I can get from my leadership to support you. Oh, that is high level, team, what we're talking about. So now I'd love the questions, like anything like, hey, how'd you do X, Y, Z? Sorry about the garden hose comment. I didn't mean that. I was just trying to be polite. Any thoughts? Yes? I think you have to, whatever you're doing today, and then think about what 4 or 5 things to add. So let me give you an example. Maybe you're doing turns, maybe you're doing stock support, maybe you're doing some report by, you're doing sales. You're not coming in with data that is unique to a supplier. So what can you share with them? Like maybe you're not sharing POS data with the manufacturer, but new things like I've always found things like I always come in and say, hey, our average customer is buying X amount with you per customer, right? And here's 200 customers, our top 200 customers make up X% of our total business together. And your average amount that you are on my transaction is whatever it is, $12, but my average order is $250, right? So think of how often you can attack there, because then you're like, oh, well, how do I get John to give me more lines per order? How do I grow per order? How do I get more customers? Those are, I think, basic things that if I was in your shoes, I would do. Coming with customer information aggregated, I think Will would tell you, he probably never sees that. That's different. You do share point of sale. But are you aggregating it up? Are you doing any segmentation? Okay. What else can you bring them? Okay, see? In those cases, if you're doing a lot of that, what else can you bring digitally? Here's how my website's doing. Here's how many times people are looking at your product set. Here's what I'm driving. Think about things that you're not giving them today. That would be kind of like, oh, that's different. There should be 4 or 5 things you can think about, and happy to, if you communicate with me directly, happy to share that. Okay? Any other thoughts on strategic versus preferred? Yes, go ahead, Mark. Did everybody hear what Mark said? He was talking about putting all your eggs in one basket. The best way to manage it is make sure you're integrated on your decisions. So if you're talking to sales and pricing and inventory and you've got all these touch points, you won't put yourself in that situation very often. You will make choices where I've got better data to know that if I get all my eggs in one basket over here, I'm in real trouble with my end customers. So what happens many times is the boss says, hey, we got to drive more rebates. We're going to come up with this preferred supplier program, whatever people call it, PSP, and we're just going to have somebody in Pittsburgh decide where we're going to stock all this information, and then all of a sudden customers are mad, right, because they're driving everything towards a rebate, and then that person doesn't get the yellow slip at the end of the year, they get the pink slip at the start of the next year, right? You have to have that data, and you have to bring it in holistically. So if you do things in a box, you will not be successful long term. And I know that's a hyperbole statement, but that's truly how I feel. Huh? Did I answer your question? Anybody got anything to add to that? Because I think that's important. Because I think at the CEO level, it's kind of like, well, I don't want to get too consolidated, but I also want to have freedom. CEOs, depending on if they like the coffee they had on Monday or not, sometimes they'll give you both answers in the same week, right? I kind of want consolidation, but I also want freedom. If you have better data, report to your CEO and C-leadership team, and they're involved in the process, whatever they want, they'll be able to more clearly define it for you. So part of why you want to be organized in category management is you have to think about how you're selling inside the organization. You have to, who am I communicating with, right? And when you get overridden on a decision, distribution's full of pocket vetoes, kind of like, well, I told you I promised I'd do that, but I actually never did it. You just keep reporting data, and you just keep moving. But I think that's the key. Think about how you're communicating inside your organization. For me, I've kind of been category management. I get to work with a lot of distributor leadership teams on this type of work. Built a lot of workbenches ourselves. There was really no an enable type solution. We were just spreadsheeting it, kind of figuring it out, and we did a good job. We were able to move the fence. But as you can see, we had a strategy, right? Everything has to hook back to a strategy. Who has a strategy for their category management? Well, it's that important. There's no sales leaders in the room, are there? Okay, good, then I'm going to say this. It's way more important than sales. Rebates, 100% of your total profit. It's more important than sales. You can't say that in front of a salesperson, and if this is recorded, that needs to be deleted. It is that important, So any other questions, because I know we're up on time? And I would encourage any of you to reach out to me. I love this stuff, as you can tell, and I think understanding what you want to do and where you want to go, I think is critical. Yes? It does. Yeah. By the way, the ones who bring more data, they're bringing the garden hose. So I really appreciate the time. Thank you, all of you. Please reach out to me. I really appreciate it.